Thanks for being here. This is a talk on why empiricism without a model of understanding makes Agilists blind. And I'm kind of doing a play on words of Immanuel Kant, who says um, experience without theory is blind. He also says theory without experience is foolhardy, is a fool's errand. And this is a recurring theme for me. I think we need more of an understanding. And I'm Al Shalloway. This is my background. And basically, I have done a lot of things, as you can see. I don't need to go through them. I've written several books. I've actually got two more beside those coming. One is about amplio accelerators, as I call it. It's a guide for making decisions. It's a subset of the amplio system. And the other one is actually co-writing. Actually, Gary Rupp is doing all of it. Mostly, I'm just kind of helping a little bit on a mid-scale, large-scale approach. But what I started seeing back in 2006 was that the team combined approach, starting with teams and combining and bringing them up, didn't work. And I wanted a more holistic view of things. And I'll talk about that. And that's really what this work is based on, is the last 17 years where I've talked to literally thousands of people. I used to go to lots of conferences. I don't know, like 2 conferences a month for years. So I've talked to lots and lots of people. And that's what I'm basing my work on. It's not like, even though I call it amplio, amplio was just a reflection, a consolidation of things like flow, lean theory of constraints, things of that nature. Okay, so the agenda here is we're going to cover a variety of things. What aspects of knowledge work need a modeling of understanding? What's the purpose? That's one of them. What's the process? What about product? What about people? There's a lot we know there we tend to ignore. And then what this opens up. I believe this perspective opens up a lot of things that you don't see otherwise. And a lot of people won't agree with this perspective. And if you don't agree, then we can talk about that during the other sessions that we have in the ACOP or, on LinkedIn and things of that nature, because I think these, I won't say they're self-evident, but I think they're kind of objective. So this is a very important concept too. Deming points out that knowledge is acquired as one makes a rational prediction based on theory and then revises the theory based on a comparison of prediction with observation. This is the scientific method. Knowledge is reflected in the theory. Without theory, there's no knowledge there's nothing to revise. There could be no new knowledge, no learning. So we talk a lot about, we have to respond, but I think we have to respond and be building a theory at the same time. And again, Kant says experience without theory is blind. Theory without experience is a fool's errand. This is a very thoughtful insight by Ellie Goldratt, creator of Theory of Constraints, and a lot more stuff. The comfort zone has less to do with control and more to do with knowledge. And what I've inferred from this and seen from this, we see people going back to old habits. We see people going back to command and control. It's not that they're stuck on the old habits. It's not that they're stuck on the command and control. They're stuck in comfort because they don't understand what's going on. So a lot of the problems we see are actually due to that. The fact that we're in a complex adaptive system means we can't understand the cause and effect of what's happening. This is not true. Just not true. That a team up approach is the way to go. Also not true. You can provide a simple framework within which people are supposed to work and they will figure things out. It's again not true. You got to look at how people think, learn, and work. And people will figure out what they need to do from a technical point of view from the statement instilling quality by adhering to a definition. Insufficient, they don't. All of these, there's a massive amount of evidence, but we kind of tend to go along with all this. Now, I'm not going to deal with all these, but I will deal with quite a few of these. And this is kind of the 4 assumptions that I see are rampant now in much of the agile space. And I really dislike this because these are all wrong and these are all limiting beliefs, and that's a serious problem. Okay, so let's get into a simple model to present some of this. I'm just going to call this productivity patterns that are about creating value. And I love Tom Gilb's definition of productivity. It's a system performance measure, which is the ratio of a selected and specified set of stakeholder values delivered over a selected and specified set of costs needed to get those value levels. We tend to dismiss productivity because we equate it with busyness. No, we want productivity, but it's measured in value, not in work done. The mistake of looking at productivity as how much work you got done, well, that's wrong. But that's not what productivity is. Same with efficiency. Efficiency is not how fast you get things done. It's how fast you get value done with the capacity you have, the capabilities you have. These are two terms that have been totally destroyed in the agile space, productivity and efficiency. I'm just mentioning productivity here. The efficiency, I'll talk in another session. Okay, so let's look at purpose for a minute. To me, we need to identify what success means to stakeholders and determine what value needs to be created to achieve that. We need to start at the top. What is this company up to? What are the stakeholders of this company up to? Now, if you're a new company, a startup, it may be that the stakeholders and the doers are the same people, but I want to make a distinction between the roles. What is the company up to? What do we look at? Okay, this is the why we're doing what we're doing. Everything is within this why. And if you're not paying attention to this, then you're like a ship without a rudder, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. So the goal is quick value consumption of our customers under the guidance of the stakeholders, or under the pointing to the leadership, the vision of the stakeholders. This creates alignment. If you don't have this, you can't align. If you don't have this, you have to come from getting the teams together, which is one of the things I said is an incorrect assumption. By the way, I could have mentioned that where I learned this is from the book Timeless Way of Building by Chris Alexander. It's one of the top 3 books I recommend. That's one. The other one's The Obstacle is the Way, which is a really book on Stoicism, but it's like kind of helps you guide and see what you need to do. And I know number 4 is Don Reinertson's Principles of Product Development Flow. And I'm trying to remember what the other, The Choice by Ellie Goldratt is the 3rd one, because it's about better thinking. So to me, it's about better thinking about where you want to go and what's the general approach you take, are more important than anything else. But after those, Don Reinertson's book, and then I would say my books are quite good. So there's a benefit to the benefit. It's funny, this is a coaching tip that you will see me use a lot. We talk about benefits a lot, and we focus on benefits, and those are good. But there's usually a benefit to the benefit. And that sounds funny, but what I mean by the benefit of creating alignment is the benefit of the benefit is alignment takes less effort than coordination. And that's important to know. That's the other, instead of bottom-up coordinating teams, which is very expensive. What started this whole endeavor for me when in 2006 I discovered Scrum of Scrums doesn't work. And at Net Objectives, we came up with something we called the product coordination team, which again, like 5 or 10 years later, was kind of modeled. They didn't call it that, but the new Scrum of Scrums, product owners coordinating and all that was kind of mirrored later by others. That was a book by Guy Beaver and I about lean, agile software development, about how do you coordinate multiple teams. And alignment is much more important than coordination, because alignment will get you people collaborating properly, okay? We must continue also to refine the purpose. I just want that to be clear. The purpose shifts slowly, but a good development organization could give input on what's possible and tend to shift the purpose and the refinement. You have a vision, you have a strategy to get there, and you want to, these will shift over time. The strategy might shift faster than the vision, actually, but even the strategy doesn't shift that much. Okay, so we need to look at this. This is like one of the things I'm saying we need is that as we go forward, we recognize, of course, we all know we're building products differently. We need to get feedback and adjust the purpose as well. Okay, so the big missing part for me is process, how we do this. There's so much that's been learned since Agile Manifesto came out that's not out in the Agile space in general. Now, there's some things in Amplo that are unique, but almost nothing. Because I've been over the last 17 years consolidating from flow, lean theory, constraints, human-centered development. I've kind of modified some things. The new stuff might be more of a modification of things, but most of this is missing, and what we want to recognize that our focus needs to be on not creating waste, not going faster. This is an old lean concept. This isn't new to me, but people don't think about it this way. My guess, and it's just a guess, I just have a lot of anecdotal evidence that I think most of the work, and I mean like 80% of what people do is waste they created themselves. And I'm not talking about planning. Planning's useful. I'm talking about making requirements and then redoing them because they aged while they were on a product backlog, redoing things, fixing bugs that you shouldn't have created in the first place, writing some code or some product that wasn't needed and you discovered that later. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, we need to get quick feedback to do this. We need to decouple action so one thing doesn't cascade into other things. One person misses a meeting and they had a serious insight, but it's the only place because it's not stored well, and all of a sudden, bam, 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 all these other things go wrong. That's what I'm talking about. This is really the problem in product work, building things. It's not that we don't see things. It's that we get some small event cascading into a large event. This is called nonlinearity. It's not even mentioned in many of the people who are talking about how complex the system is. Yeah, it's complex. Yes, we can't see everything, but that's not our problem. Our problem is when we don't see something, we don't see the ramifications of that. That's our problem. We got to build quality in. In the early days of Agile, you had two camps. XP said you got to build around the quality of the product, and Scrum said, no, here's how you do it interactively, incrementally, and the product will take care of itself. And it's like, no, that doesn't happen. And I remember doing XP training. I got into Scrum because, well, I got into Scrum because it was so easy to put in, but I was mostly loving XP because as a heavy developer at that time for about 20 years, like no, 30 years by that point, I had a real respect for extreme programming, but we couldn't get people to do it because the bar of what a quality developer needed was so low, and I think it's gotten lower, which is a problem. We're worse off in this than we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we weren't quite sure what to do, so it could be understandable. Now we know. We know how to do acceptance test-driven development. We know how to do behavioral-driven development. We know why tests should happen first, but people aren't doing it, and that's what I guess I'm railing against. We got to eliminate delays in the workflow. We don't go faster, we eliminate delays. The just in time you've probably heard. Just in time builds quality in. These things you've heard probably, from Lean. Okay, work on small batches. These are generic things in the Agile space we need to be doing so we can release faster. And attend to the value stream. Very, very important. So this attitude is to create this holistic view. When Alexander says you don't build up from the bottom, he doesn't mean you command and control. What he means is you come from the vision of what you're trying to do and break it down. And I don't talk about that much in this talk, but I'll just mention it here because it's relevant, this is where lean management would say middle up-down management, the middle layer, the director, the like a CEO, not a CEO, CIO, CTO, something like that. They lead, and in the my experience over the last 20 years of doing this, more than that actually, I have seen virtually every significant change improving an organization was led by a director or mid-manager and supported by the C-level, but not led by the C-level. And I'm talking about drastic improvements. $1 or $2 million with a very tiny investment of just a few days. It's because the holistic view, as you look at things properly, you cannot solve things if you don't look at it properly. Yet we're not. The benefit is we avoid creating waste. We avoid all the coordination costs, all the not fit for purpose work teams are doing. Okay. And this enables our capacity to be used on creating value. We don't spend it on waste. Now, what this requires of us is this requires that we kind of know what to do. And a lot of people say, well, you can't. You got to inspect and adapt. You got to run fail-fast experiments. And I disagree. And this is not just my opinion, by the way. I get this not just from the evidence of the last 17 years, but Don Reinertsen wrote a book on 175 principles to look at. That's a lot. Okay. Some of them I think he wrote personally for me, because when I read the book, I said, oh, I'm wrong here. I can learn something by reading a theory by somebody else. See, this is a key right there. When you have theory, Don wrote down a theory, talks about it, and then, of course, I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but I mapped it to what I'm doing. And now my dormant knowledge, my past experience, I can see what he talks about, and now I'm smarter. And you could say I even have the understanding of it because I'm using my experience. People say you need experience. That's true, but you don't need an experience going forward. You want it what you've already accomplished. So this is important. We've got to look for what's this theory we can look at. And Goldratt says if we dive deep enough, we'll find there are very few elements at the base. The root causes, which through cause and effect connections are governing the entire system. And I've had conversations with Tom Gilb, who I consider to be one of the top two leading thought leaders in this whole space of success in organizations. Don Reinertson is the second one. And I would say Ellie Goldratt would be right up there. Unfortunately, he passed away. So this is not a new thought by me. I mean, I was headed in this direction, I think, on my own, but reading Don's book came out in 2009, and that's when I read it. Goldratt's The Choice. Unfortunately, I only read that about 5 years ago. Wow, time flies. And Tom Gilb, I've been really tight with for the last 2 or 3 years. We talk weekly, and they all believe this. Now, it doesn't mean we see it all. This is the thing. He didn't say we see them all. He said they're there, though. And this goes back to Deming's. Comment of you have a theory. So we have this model. We understand it. When we see something new, we add it to the model. And that's how this works. Okay. Now, I didn't want to dive deep, but I have to talk about value streams, or some of these things just don't make any sense. So I'm going to do a little depth, 2-3 minutes, not much, about value streams. And our common organizational structure is hierarchical. And this isn't good. And the reason it isn't good is because the idea, and you could say this is waterfall, but this idea is still pervasive, by the way, that each step of the way we hand off just once. In other words, I'm efficient here, I'm efficient here, I'm efficient here. Oh, look, I only have one handoff every few weeks, only one handoff every few weeks. This is the way to go. But it isn't. And the reason it isn't is this encourages big batches, which slow down delivery, but it causes delays in feedback. So that causes waste because we misunderstood something here and we didn't discover it yet. All this work is being done on a misunderstanding. It also causes too much work in process. So this is the problem, in a sense, is that we're working this way. And hierarchically, what this has us do as well, which is not so good, is that we tend to focus on the people instead of the work running across the organization. And that's a big issue. Okay. Because when a mistake happens here and we discover it there, we've got an issue. So what we need to do is basically fix this and not speed up by going faster at the steps, but rather by working on small items of high value so we get quick feedback. That's really the essence of what Agile is about. But we've got to know about value streams, and we've got to know about first principles, what Goldratt says guides us through here. So this is what a first principle is. This is not my definition. I might have reworded it. This goes back to Aristotle, by the way. This is not a new concept. First principles of knowledge work describe the causes and effects underneath Agile. They stand on their own. So you can debate me very well. I welcome it, as a matter of fact. I may not have distilled these. These are not my personal first principles. They're my observation of what I think are first principles, and my observations could be wrong. They're not defined, but are discovered through observation and relentless evaluation. Violating them has consequences, typically creating waste and lost opportunities. That's typically the consequences. They can be used to provide guidance as to what individuals, teams, and organizations should do or avoid doing. They're listed as Ampolo's best discernment of the most useful. There are really hundreds out there. Not all of Don's were first principles of the 175. A lot of them were principles derived from first principles. First principles are not derived from anything. They're just like seen as evidence. Anyway, I will make this comment. I know Jeff Sutherland, people keep asking me about it, so I figured I'll mention it. He's written a book called First Principles of Scrum. Now, I've read the book. He's not talking about these first principles. He's not really talking about first principles. He's talking about a variety of things, sociological, complexity, and all that are out there. Yes, those are out there. And some of them are first principles, and some of them are just his opinion of how things work. And then he uses those to derive why Scrum works. Now, actually, as I go through these, you can see where Scrum follows these and where it doesn't. And you can see why it works. And if Scrum does follow some of these, but they do it tacitly, we want to do it explicitly. So one is we can complete a subset of a larger item faster than a full item. Smaller is typically faster. People learn faster when they can relate to their own experiences, like that example I gave with Don Reinertson and myself. Local improvements don't necessarily result in global improvements. Delays in workflow, getting feedback, and in taking advantage of lessons learned causes waste. We don't course correct quickly. That's why planes, when they're trying to go someplace, they're almost never pointed at the right direction. They're continuously adjusting their path because anything off heading on track is waste, takes more time, takes more fuel. Okay. People working beyond capacity, you know what this is like when you're overloaded. It causes waste, additional work, multitasking, but waste occurs also because feedback's not quick and we don't course correct quickly. Handoffs risk a loss of knowledge and information. Most of our challenges are caused by the system. This is what's called a common cause as opposed to a special cause. This goes back, a long time. Deming and Shewhart talk about this a lot. We only see what we think and talk about. So if we get in an echo chamber, we're not going to see certain things. It's why nothing should be immutable in a system. We should always look, is it effective? Is it not effective? Is it a first principle? Is it something we can do out of that? Okay, we can't manage what we don't see. That's a corollary, I suppose, to this idea of we only see and think what we talk about. Okay, there's more, but I can't go into this. I'm going to mention what's there, but I'm not going to go into in depth. First principles are a tough row to hoe for a lot of people. In other words, it's hard for people to come from these abstract principles and figure things out. So, and even if they could, they'd have to reinvent things, and there's no need for that. So what we need to do is have things like guidance from the first principles, factors for effective value streams. These are how you can tell if you're following first principles or not. Collaboration boards for learning, working, and decision-making together. Accelerator patterns for helping solve problems and all that. Agile is not a new science. It's 22 years old as it was defined. But I consider it to go back way before that. In the 90s, there was all sorts of things. Gary Boehm and other people, they were talking about different circular models and feedback. It's been around Scrum came out in 1995. It's almost 3 decades. And in the age of the internet, and particularly now with AI coming up, knowledge needs to be spread a lot faster than we are. So having to rebuild everything is absurd. And I think I say this later, but I'll say it now too. What we want is, yes, we don't want to overload people. I mean, if you look at the Empiricism system, just, oh my God, all this stuff. And there is. 17 years. Remember, I've been working on this thing for 17 years. There's a lot of stuff. But that's not the point. The point is, how easy is it to get to? Right now, the Empiricism system is not as easy to get to as I like, but I'm working with the ACEs and just on my own as well to make it simple. What we want is a system that's easy to access the information we need at the time. Not too much, not too little. That is a tough problem. That's what's taking me 17 years. It's not the content. It's how do you navigate it? How do you pull it out? And that's what we need to do. And that's what I'm working on. And the COP here will be part of this because people will make requests and ask. And if you're not in the Amplo community practice, you can still contact me and say, hey, I need this or I have questions about that. But the best way is through the ACOP. Okay, let's get to the product. This is the what we're actually building. We need to attend to the customer journey. Building incrementally can avoid creating waste. I know I don't know what the exact product's like, but in the 80s, I wrote about a dozen or more vertical applications special to an industry. And almost nothing, 5 to 10% maybe of what I wrote wasn't used. How did I do that? I didn't know Agile. This is pre-Agile. What I did is I watched the customer journey. I watched how customers are doing, and I made that better. I didn't come up with ideas. I only worked on something that's valued. It's like driving in the fog. You can see a little bit. You can't see very far. So you go as fast as you can with how far you build, and you do that, and that's usually right. And if you're not sure even about that, then you put in a way to change it. And I've done that too. But then you got to know how to write code well. Okay, we got to shift the focus from the system to the customer. Customers do not put 9A after 10. Systems do that. The UX in software is absurd because people are thinking about the system like the database. It just gets my goat. It's just so bad. So I talking about I talked about value streams lightly, the start from where we start our work to where we end up, where we get an idea for the customer, we end up with a customer. But these are called development value streams when we build them. But the customer value stream is what the customer does. And customers will have sometimes several value streams because they're going to have to get on the system, see what to do, make decisions, things like that. Then there are operation value streams and business enabling value streams. Alan Ward, as far as I know, was the first guy to talk about this decades ago, actually, a long time ago. So the customer journey is really critical. And then business stakeholders create the context for all of this, okay? Now, what do I mean by the customer journey? This is important to understand. See, because the value stream is good. It helps align people within the value stream, and it sees the need of the people. Multiple value streams is useful because, like a pizza delivery place, we'll have the order taker, the maker of the pizza, the driver, things like that. Seeing the relationship between these value streams is useful. But just to be clear what I mean by the customer journey, if we have a system, the customer's operational value stream, their journey goes in and out of our system. Like pizza, say, okay, I get on the phone, I call them, I get my order, hang up the phone, I wait a little bit, then they deliver the pizza, I go to the door, pay for it somehow, pay for it at the beginning probably. That whole episode, all these steps, some of them are in the system and some of them are outside the system. Now, what's really interesting, where true innovation comes from, and this is an invitation for people here to send me an email or somehow in the Amplo community practice. I would suggest most of the truly innovative things had little to do with the system in this and more to do with cutting out all the crap up here. I'll give you a couple examples. Before I do, well, here's an example actually. So this is an example I've used. I've got a refrigerator like this, not this model, but it's cool. They have a door within a door, so you can load the fridge and the freezer as you want to. But if you load drinks up here, then you could open this door. This one's closed. You open this door up and you get the drinks out. You don't lose any refrigerant. But what's cool is how this has changed my use of my refrigerator. I've got one in the garage. I put all my drinks here and I organize my entire way of doing this and making sure I have all the different things I want in this. And so a lot of the, how do I go grocery store? How do I use, order beer, wine, soft drinks, whatever, has shifted for me, where this waste of mine has gone down because of this change to the system. Now think about this. We've got to shift our perspective. We need to focus on the customer journey and their perspective. We must stop focusing on the system. We get insane UXs by focusing on the system. And I'm suggesting that true innovation has more to do with making the customer journey outside of the system more efficient. I'll give you two examples, iPod and Venmo. The iPod didn't add anything that wasn't available, nothing. But what it enabled you to do was get your music, store your music, listen to your music on the phone or on an iPod. And then we'll move to it solved all this coordination you had to do. That's really cool innovation. Now, that's not the only kind of innovation. Sometimes you actually create something new. But then there's also Venmo, bank paying thing. Okay. So people may be unpredictable. As now we're going to the people part. I'm getting toward the end, but unfortunately I'm going to use up probably all the time for today. People may be unpredictable, but there's a mechanism by which they work. And this is like virtually never discussed. It's not even that well known. I have an odd background in this. In the 80s, I was very heavily involved in the personal development community, first taking the workshops. And then I was so impressed with them, I actually started producing them. So I kind of got behind the scenes about how some of these worked. Very cool. One was a predecessor to Landmark. It was called the S Training. And I've been in others. LogoNet, which is where I learned a lot of stuff here, is really more LogoNet. But And there's some really interesting things about how people think and how they see the world and how they make decisions and how you can avoid resistance. And we need to look at this. So one of the things to be aware of is there might be this world out there. There's actually even a bunch of physicists who think it's all an illusion, but I won't go that metaphysical on you. But what happens is we see something that's not the world. We look at this, we see a very small subset of this. We've known this for a long time. We filter out what we think is important based on what we are already now aware of. So new concepts don't come to us. We don't think and talk about what we see what we think and talk about. So if we're not thinking and talking about it and something happens, we don't even see it. It gets filtered out. And this is a concept I learned from Flores. It's listening here is a noun. In other words, the voice, you've been having this running commentary this whole time I've been talking. How do I know that? Because you're all human beings, okay? Human beings do this. We see things, we hear things, and then we have this running commentary in our head. And Flores called that listening. That's your listening as a noun. What is that running commentary? Okay. And there's some things that are interesting here. We're not listening. You're not really listening to what I'm saying as much as you're listening to the internal conversation you have about what I'm saying. You might have just said, no, that's not true. Or, yeah, what is he talking about? I'm listening to him. No, you're listening to I'm listening to him. That's what I'm talking about. This happens 24/7, maybe when you sleep, not so much. This is actually why meditation is so cool. It calms that voice down. The funny thing is we actually think this is us. It's not us. I won't go metaphysical on this one. I'm just going to throw that out as a possibility that we're not that voice. That voice is just some biomechanical thing that happens, and we are bigger than that voice, better than that voice. Okay, so we judge whether what we see is good or bad, and we do this based on what we're up to, what our commitments are, what we want to see happening. And if we judge things that are going, oh, this is great, happy, satisfied. If they're not going great, we're uncertain. Oh, well, that can lead to sadness, fear, other things. And fear tends to lead to anger. So this is the mechanics of a human being, okay? Now, there's a problem with this because it's happening to the people you're coaching and to you. And this is the other problem. People don't make decisions on the basis of their emotions. Excuse me, they make it on the basis of their emotions, not on this logic. I've been talking logical. Now I'm saying, okay, unfortunately, that's not how people do. And the problem with communication is there's this world and we see something and they see something else. And we have a listening about what we see, and they have a listening about what they see, and we judge whether it's good or bad, and they judge whether it's good or bad, and both of us think this is a reality, and then we wonder why we're not communicating. And I love George Bernard Shaw's comment, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion it has taken place. You're starting to get a little bit about why systems thinking is so important. Okay. Now, this is a funny poem to throw in here, but since I've talked about the listening isn't us, I love Rainier Maria Rilke, and I just wanted to read this poem real quick because it lets you see that there's this difference. And he talks about, my life is not the steeply sloping hour in which you see me hurrying. Much stands behind me. I stand before it like a tree. I am only one of many mouths. And at that, the one will be still the soonest. In other words, our true self, we often don't bring out. I am the rest between two notes, which are somehow always in discord, because death's note wants to climb over. But in the dark interval, reconciled, they stay there trembling, and the song goes on beautiful. I just love him. Anyway, I want to pose that we're not this mechanical piece. We work this mechanical way, but that's not who we are as individuals. I just wanted you to be clear that's not what I think. So we have to consider a couple of things here. We have to consider transition speed as well. Okay, we know learning is best done in increments, but the rate of emotional shifting must be done in increments. This is why the Kanban method attends to it. That's why I say, the Kanban method is good. It's actually a very focused way of using Kanban, but it's got some great things. Now, what this opens up is significant. I have mentioned we don't want a simple system. We want a full system that enables a good coach to provide a simple working system to a team and then to modify it as the team's needs and challenges change. Okay, this is the last slide. I got one more thing. This is very pertinent in today's world. You hear all this talk about agile coaches, scrum masters being laid off. And I think what's finally catching up to the agile community is that simple systems don't work, but people need to use simple systems. Oh my God, that sounds like a contradiction. We're in real trouble. And I'm saying, no. The possibility, if you're a coach or consultant out there, is how do you learn to create simple systems so people can use them from a big system? Think of Wikipedia. You could double the amount of content out there and it wouldn't be any harder to use. That's why I'm building Amplio the way it is. This is a huge opportunity. And by the way, if you're a manager or somebody who needs a lot of coaches, you want to build a community of coaches like this that can do this. One-on-one coaching of teams to me is wasteful. When I go into a place, I can handle at least 3. And I've talked to a lot of other people who say they can handle more, and most everybody can handle at least 2. So one good coach who knows how to do this would easily replace 3 scrum masters. I'm not trying to get people fired. I'm trying to get people to add more value. And I'm committed to helping those who may not have experience. I've got a variety of programs here trying to help people who have a lot of experience, who don't have a lot of experience, jump ahead of people by doing knowledge. So these are 3 programs I've got. Contact me for more information on this. Again, work in the community of practice to do more.